Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Dr. Glenn is a clinical psychologist and former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leaving the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Before we get started, if you haven't downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with one of my favorite master coaches, Yvonne, who's got a couple ideas she wanted to talk about, run by me, have a dialogue about, and we thought we'd invite you to share in the insights. Isn't that right, Yvonne?
Yes, it is.
And hit me. Go ahead.
I have a bunch of stuff I want to talk about, but there is one topic that I really just want to address, and we've talked about it before in the past. That is the topic of fasting. I don't know if you've addressed it on your radio program yet or not.
Let's talk about it.
Okay. Well, this is a hot topic, especially today. One of the reasons that this came up to me, reminded me of it, was because I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers, hour-long podcast, maybe longer, and they mentioned fasting. And what I love to do is read the comments. That's my favorite thing to do. I go down to the comments, and you would have thought they started a war because of what they said and just the difference of opinion in fasting. And it was specifically addressing people that struggle with food obsession and binging. The comments were pretty, I wouldn't say hilarious, but definitely polarizing. So I thought I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. What do you think?
Sure. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, I think the first problem is that sometimes we forget that there are different types of fasting. We've got intermittent fasting, water fasting, dry fasting, juice fasting. We've got different terms like time-restricted eating. Then there's alternate day fasting, prolonged fasting, religious fasting. We've got the fasting mimicking diet. And then my favorite one, for a couple of different reasons, is OMAD, which is 1 meal a day. And one of my favorite reasons that it's my favorite is what you changed that acronym to be.
What did I say it was? I forget.
OBAD.
Oh, yeah.
OBAD, 1 binge a day.
Binging on a schedule.
Binging on a schedule. And that was why I loved it. That was my favorite fasting. I've tried almost all of those fastings. I've done almost all of them. Well, first of all, let me say that I think we talk a lot about autonomy and how important it is that people choose how they want to eat, what they want to eat. When it comes to fasting, it's important that they choose that for themselves too, especially depending on that long list that I mentioned. But I think that sometimes we forget to qualify the reason for the fast. Why are you fasting? And going back to OMAD versus OBAD, I know for me, it was so I could binge. I fasted just so I could binge.
Yeah.
And one of the most difficult things to get my brain around was that if I don't fast anymore, I can't binge anymore. I really struggled with that for a long time until I decided to give a try what you and the other coaches had suggested. This is way back when I was getting coaching. Was just try adding breakfast in and maybe having your meals spread out throughout the day. And I thought, well, I've already tried that before and I could never lose weight. It ended up becoming this alternative, no, I'm going to add breakfast in so I don't binge. And I used to think that I couldn't add in breakfast because I was always so hungry at the end of the day. But the fasting really affected my thinking on when I was hungry, when I wasn't hungry. It feels really good. You feel really empowered when you can go for hours and hours and hours and days at a time without food and have that control when it's time to eat again. And it's difficult to control how much food you're eating in that time frame. You get back on that binge restrict cycle. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Where did you land?
Well, what I did was tested the breakfast, and this is before I started getting coaching. My initial thought was, and this goes into explaining what a fast is again. Well, I'll just have some cream in my coffee and I will measure it. It's 50 calories because that breaks a fast. So when people talk about why they're fasting, well, what are they fasting from? Are they getting rid of all calories? What breaks a fast? Does medication break a fast? And there are all these questions around fasting. And somebody asked me one time, does 50 calories really mean you're having a meal? And I had to think about that one. That one was really tough. And then I had heard you say, try it for 6 months. Try adding breakfast in for 6 months and see what happens. And I thought, okay. And actually, I think at the time you said 4 months. I don't remember. I've heard you say anywhere from 2 to 6 months.
4 to 6.
Okay. In my head, it was 4 months. So when I added breakfast back in and I stopped binging at night and I had some nice rules to create safe boundaries, I started the clock because I really believed fasting was good. There's a lot of science behind it. And I thought it was really important to practice what is called a fasting focused lifestyle. That's what I'd heard it called. And I thought, okay, let's see what happens. I'll give it 4 months. What could hurt? I've been struggling for so long. Let's see what happens. And I would say by 6 weeks, I was of the impression I will never fast again because I really enjoyed my food more than I ever did when I was binging because I could eat it and stop. And then I was losing weight, which I wasn't even trying to lose weight at first because I just thought I couldn't stop binging. So I figured I'd be overweight and I was in menopause. So you can't lose weight in menopause. So I was enjoying my food. I was losing weight and I thought, I'm never going to fast again. I'm not even going to try it. And that circles back around to what's the purpose of the fast. And so a lot of times, we get clients that will say, fasting works. I need to skip breakfast because that's the only thing that works. And yet the problem is they're still struggling in the evening and they're still overeating or they're binging, they're breaking the rules. And I don't know how many times I've had clients say to me, I finally added breakfast in and I can't believe that it worked. And I'm like, I'm right there with you. I said the same thing. That's what I wanted to talk about. I got a couple other points, but what do you think, Glenn?
So is fasting part of your life now or no?
That's a good question because that brings up another point. What is fasting? I think it's each individual because honestly, if we go to bed and we don't eat until we get up again, we're all fasting, right? Isn't that what breakfast is called, breaking your fast? It becomes, well, how long is that? And we like to call it a fasting window or an eating window. Well, what's the time frame? I don't count anymore. I just naturally have a time when I stop eating at the end of the day. I have a time that I prefer to eat my last meal, and that's several hours before I go to bed. I love having my evenings without food. I didn't think it was possible either. I thought I would struggle with it, but actually, the last meal, I never think about food until it's morning. I don't think about recipes. I don't think about anything. I don't daydream about food. I usually have a really good evening with my husband or something else we've planned. I have several hours before I go to bed and usually within an hour or two of waking. And that's the other thing. We say, do you eat breakfast? Well, everybody's eating breakfast once they eat. I think we get this idea in our mind that after 11:59 a.m., it's no longer breakfast. I don't know. That's my guess.
I see.
It's noon, so it's not breakfast, but really it's just when are you breaking your fast? And so I've had clients that will wake up at 5 and say, yes, I eat breakfast, but it's like 10 or 10:30 and they're still struggling in the evening. And so they may not be eating one meal a day. They might be eating two meals or a couple meals and a snack, but they start much later in their day. And so I don't even know how long is my fasting window as opposed to my eating window. I wake up between 5 and 7 and I will eat within about an hour after waking. Just depends. I finish my last meal anywhere between 2 and 5. Yeah, sometimes it's 2 o'clock and I am perfectly fine. It is not the same for me every day. Sometimes it's 5. I usually don't like to eat much later than that. And I'm usually in bed between 8 and 9 in the evening.
Let me share a couple of thoughts if that's okay.
Yes.
This is a really helpful talk because I haven't done a lot of public discussions about fasting, and I know it's a hot topic and a controversial topic. I look at it from the perspective of defeating your cravings. What I found is that people are more successful when they don't have much more than a 12-hour window for the first 4 to 6 months that they're trying to defeat their cravings. And my hypothesis is that it's too organismically distressing, that it stimulates too much real hunger, particularly during the period when they still have a lot of excitotoxins in their system from all of the starch and sugar and processed food that they've been eating. And I've seen that once people get through that period, if they're of the belief that fasting is an important medical intervention, that it's got a lot of benefits, that they can integrate it back in slowly in various degrees with various definitions, just like you're talking about. Most people don't. Most people, once they discover, like what you've discovered, that having more regular, reliable nutrition and keeping the fasting window to 12 hours or less or so each night, most people don't really want to go back because it was so uncomfortable to be on the feast and famine roller coaster and feel like they're at the mercy of their cravings and their impulses and obsessing about food and recipes and all that kind of thing. That the comfort and peace that they find, it's not just having the more regular meals, but it's doing everything else that goes along with defeating your craving and fixing your thinking about food and self-regulation. I find most clients don't go back to that. I have clients that insist on one meal a day or longer fasts, and I've not really had a lot of success with them. Maybe half the success rate, maybe less. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know all of the medical benefits of fasting, and I can't override your doctor's orders, but I can tell you we've worked with about 2,000 clients over the years. I just see people are a lot more successful when they fast, but it's the 12 hours from dinner till breakfast and very rarely longer than that. I do know that it's not really beneficial to graze all the time. I do know that the muscles that move the food through your intestines, they create peristalsis, that they require rest, just like all the other muscles in your body require rest. And so I know that you can do damage with that. I know there's some meta-analyses lately that are showing that there's an increase in all-cause mortality for people that are skipping breakfast. So that kind of comes into play, although I've heard alternative explanations for why that could be. But generally speaking, my advice to people, if you're struggling with overeating beyond your own best judgment, is to eat regularly, reliably, 3 meals a day, maybe a snack or two, and try not to have more than 12 hours between dinner and breakfast, because it seems like the mind perceives that the next meal isn't coming for too long. And that's a big part of why people are breaking down in the evening and overdoing it in the evening. I don't know that I'm the ultimate expert on all this. I can just tell you what I've seen, and that's the protocol that I recommend for people and get the most success with. I appreciate having the talk. I imagine this interview will have a lot of comments underneath it.
Well, and that's the thing. It goes back to autonomy. If it works for you, if it's really working for you and you don't struggle with binge eating, you don't overeat when you eat your meals, and you're able to integrate proper nutrition, and you've talked to your doctor and you have good lab results and all that, and then more power to you. I think that that's great. I really do. But it's the people that really struggle with binge eating. And I think one of the biggest problems, and this was for me, was that fasting took off weight that I had gained recently. I would feel thinner for the period of time after a day or so, especially if I was doing long fasting. I would feel better in my clothes. The problem was I couldn't just not eat forever. I had to eat again. And so as soon as I started eating again, I didn't feel comfortable in my clothes. I felt horrible. And then for me personally, I got to the point where I just had no desire to fast anymore because the binging had such a huge hold on me. I could fast breakfast and that was it. It didn't give me the weight loss results that I had, and it just kept me in a terrible food obsession cycle. And so that's why I say, if it works, that's great. But what is working? Define what it works means.
Yep. The thing that you said, Yvonne, that resonated the most with me that I wanted to underscore was the panic that you went through when you started eating breakfast and realizing that if you weren't going to fast, you couldn't binge anymore. Taking to another level, people feel that about purging also. If I'm not going to purge, then I can't binge. we get a lot of people who come in. I never designed the system to help with bulimia, but apparently some people find it is helpful. But they usually come in and think, well, if Glenn can just teach me, or all of you guys can just teach me how to stop binging, then I won't have to purge anymore. But the truth is, you got to stop purging in order to stop binging, and you have to go through that fear. You're going to go through that period where you think, oh my God, I can't binge anymore. And if you do binge, you got to sit with it, right? You can't try to engage in the compensatory behavior. So I just wanted to underscore that is a natural fear that people go through when they're trying to resolve this. And the only way out is through, from what I've seen. The only way out is through.
Yeah. I've found that in my personal experience working with people, that the strict dieters or the people that have done long-term fasts, or that, have been on that fasting roller coaster, that they actually do really well with regular meals and a few simple rules, because they are so used to waiting to their next meal. If they can eat a meal and stop, they know they can wait a few hours till their next meal because they've waited
Oh,
days to get
yeah, yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah. I had a friend tell me once, and I didn't ask her what she meant by it. I just pondered it for a while. She was complaining about, I don't remember, it was a teacher friend of mine. I don't remember exactly why she was complaining about this, but it had to do with getting in a small meal or something. I don't know. She said, I've worked really hard to shrink my stomach. And she meant the stomach. And it's important that I eat these small meals. I don't think she was eating frequently throughout the day, but enough, eating smaller meals. And that's all I heard. I thought, did she have surgery? What did she do? And I realized that if I eat smaller meals, if I'm not binging, then the stomach itself might shrink. And I don't know that that's what's happening, but that's what felt like was happening. Even though I wasn't going to binge anymore, a normal meal, when I got used to it, was not just satisfying. Sometimes I was full. I wasn't overly full or stuffed, but that sensation of feeling like, oh, that was such a good meal. I feel so satisfied. It feels so good. With a lot fewer calories and volume, and when I say calories, I mean like not thousands after fasting, I could enjoy it, and I could still feel the pleasure of just enjoying a really nice meal. And then all my meals, and I typically have similar size meals for each of my meals, they all pretty much feel that way.
That's a very astute observation. That's really important. Thank you. Yvonne, was there something else you wanted to say about fasting?
Just one more thing that I'd like your thoughts on, because I have some thoughts, but I don't think we've talked about it much before. People that think they can't eat breakfast, that they can't stomach it. I just can't. It makes me feel sick. Which, again, autonomy. If that's true, then let's see if we can figure out how to get you to eat a little bit differently or work around that. But I also found when I was fasting that it was really hard to start breakfast again, but only initially. What I found was most people do well. Well, number one, if they're not overeating in the evening, it definitely does make you a little more hungry in the morning. It's hard to want to eat if you've binged at night. It's hard to want to eat in the morning.
Yes, yes.
But if you start incorporating even small things, for the people that say, oh, I don't even binge at night, but I can't eat in the morning, just something small, and then start incrementally making it larger, whether more calories or more volume, then over time you can implement a decent sized breakfast. And I'm not talking about, when I say decent size, I don't mean 200 calories. We've talked about that before, where somebody says, well, I eat breakfast, and it's maybe 150 calories of oatmeal, and that's it. They're thinking I eat oatmeal. I have oatmeal for breakfast. But it means making it a little bit more substantial. They may need to start small. What are your thoughts on that?
To phase their way in, yeah. My thoughts are you're a smart lady. Virtually everything about overcoming overeating has to do with starting with a low bar and changing your identity accordingly. Because if you find a low bar and do something consistently, then your identity function will kick in. You'll observe yourself having breakfast every morning. Even if it is the first couple of weeks, if it's just 250, 300 calories, you'll observe yourself doing it and you'll say, I must be a breakfast eater. And then character trumps willpower. Once you really believe yourself to be a particular kind of person, you engage in the behavior mostly automatically. I am very much in favor of starting with a low bar and doing it consistently.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. If you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.